Hello and welcome to our webinar on the effective components of successful early learning to kindergarten transitions. The transition from preschool or other early learning settings into kindergarten is an important event in the lives of more than 3.5 million children and families each year. The importance of this transition has been gaining national attention in recent years, and schools are focusing on various ways to support children and families as they transition to school. The webinar you're attending is designed to address this topic. This webinar is provided by REL Northwest, which is operated by Education Northwest in Portland, Oregon. Co-sponsoring today's events are the U.S. Department of Education's Institute of Education Sciences and the Center on Enhancing Early Learning Outcomes. We are also excited to have speakers joining us from the National Institute for Early Education Research, the Center on Enhancing Early Learning Outcomes, Earl Boyles Elementary School, Elkton Charter School, and the Children's Institute. Please mute your phones so that background noise is minimized. We will have a dedicated time for Q&A throughout the webinar and at the end of the webinar. However, please feel free to submit a question at any time by typing in the chat box. We will ask those questions at appropriate times throughout the webinar. This webinar is being recorded and we will archive it on our website. My name is Fiona Helsel, and I'm the webinar moderator for today. I'm the Deputy Director for REL Northwest and have been leading our cross-REL efforts in early childhood education over the last couple of years. Before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to tell you a little bit about REL Northwest. REL Northwest is one of 10 regional education labs funded by the Institute of Education Sciences. We work with stakeholders in Alaska, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, and Washington to assist them to use their data systems to conduct and support high-quality research and evaluation focused on regional priorities and to help educational policymakers and practitioners incorporate data and research into everyday decision-making. REL Northwest is operated by Education Northwest, which has been serving the 5-state region from our headquarters in Portland, Oregon for 50 years. Our work focuses on 3 priorities, including school improvement, equity in special populations, and high school and beyond. Through our regular needs sensing and conversations with regional stakeholders over the last few years, REL Northwest identified early childhood education as a priority area. There are 3 goals for today's webinar. We'd like to increase your knowledge of what the research indicates are effective components of an early learning to kindergarten transition. We're going to learn about an initiative in New Jersey that is focusing on effective instruction as an important component in the transition, and we'll learn specific transition ideas from practitioners in urban and rural sites in Oregon. To help us meet those goals, REL Northwest is honored to have 4 speakers joining us to present about early learning to kindergarten transitions. Our keynote speaker is Dr. Shannon Riley-Ayers, who is an Associate Research Professor at the National Institute for Early Education Research and a Technical Assistance Lead to state education agencies for the Center on Enhancing Early Learning Outcomes. Following Dr. Riley-Ayers will be Ms. Ericka Guynes, who is the principal of the Earl Boyles Elementary School in Portland, Oregon, Mr. Andy Bowe, who is Superintendent of the Elkton School District in Elkton, Oregon, and Dr. Marina Morell, who is the Senior Research and Policy Advisor at the Children's Institute in Portland, Oregon. I'm honored to turn the webinar over to Dr. Shannon Riley-Ayers. Shannon conducts research in the preschool to grade 3 continuum with a focus on teaching quality, assessment, and professional learning. She is first author of the Early Learning Scale, a comprehensive performance-based assessment system for preschool and kindergarten that's currently being used in several districts in New Jersey, the states of West Virginia and South Dakota, and as a training module with the New Teacher Project. Before joining NIEER, Shannon was co-director of the Office of Early Literacy at the New Jersey Department of Education and was instrumental in developing and implementing the New Jersey Early Literacy Initiative. Welcome, Shannon.
Thanks, Fiona. I'm happy to be here today to talk about K-3 alignment and cohesion and to really highlight some of the work that we're doing here in New Jersey, where I have the good fortune to work with colleagues like Vincent Costanza and Sharon Ryan. As highlighted by several recent reports, we are showing that we have a fragmented system of care and education for our youngest learners. As we gather today, we understand that this is an issue, and really we see this manifested in different ways. So for teachers, this fragmentation can look like a push down of expectations. For leaders in the field, this fragmentation can create a lack of alignment in curriculum and assessment practices. And for children and families, this can often lead to isolation and confusion when we have this disjointed system. So what should our response be? Today we'll dig in a little bit and talk about ways to combat this fragmentation. So one way is through alignment, where there is a clear linear path for early childhood for our youngest learners. We'll talk about connections, where we have systems and practices that are connected throughout the early childhood experience. And collaboration. I mean, this really can't happen without a collaboration of agencies, of schools, communities, families. It truly needs to be a group effort. So for the sake of clarity, I have placed what I believe and what the literature demonstrates are some key ingredients for P-3 cohesion into 3 buckets here. And the first is leadership. So when we think about leadership, it is pretty broadly defined in my eyes, all levels of leadership. And in order to have this aligned approach to early childhood education and care, then we have to have systems aligned and stakeholders at all levels leading the charge here for this cohesion. So examples would be state leaders. These are often found across agencies. We know many states are working diligently to break down these silos so that the agencies can begin to work collaboratively. Local leadership is important in the implementation of policies and practices that pull together this systems approach. And in just a little bit, you'll hear both from Ericka and Andy about how they're leading in their particular context. There's also the inclusion of political leaders here. We see that states have a strong political will. They're often more able to effectively implement strong and aligned early childhood systems. It should be noted that much work can be done with support from the federal government through opportunities like Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge Grant and the Preschool Development Grant. And you'll see that evidence as I walk through some examples of our New Jersey work. Also listed here are funding leaders. I believe that private funding agencies are important and they're very well vested in early childhood education. And it is often with their support that innovative programs can be successful. Here, the National Association of Elementary School Principals is leading leaders in early childhood education. They're doing this by bringing the topic to the forefront with publications like their newest publication on the competencies for effective principal practice in pre-K to grade 3. And here you see on this slide an outline of those competencies. I encourage you to take a look at their document. It is a great guide and framework to help principals create and support connections in birth to age 5 care and education with the K-3 system where so many principals work within. The intention is to support local leaders and principals to implement practices and policies that ensure a successful pre-K to grade 3 continuum within their schools. There are other examples of strong leadership, and as I mentioned, political leadership is important here, and just a couple of ideas that come to mind are West Virginia, New York City. You also see support for superintendents in early childhood through the Buffett Institute in Nebraska. Illinois is listed here because it's notable that it is the only state that has included early childhood content specifically in their licensure, accreditation, mentoring, or evaluation processes for principals. Listed last is the New Jersey Early Childhood Academy, and this is a professional learning community that we've developed in New Jersey. We're currently in our 4th year of running it. It covers the state, so we have some cross-district conversations. It's in partnership with both NIEER and CEELO, as well as the Department of Education. And here's where we bring together leadership teams in early childhood from districts to come together. We ask districts to bring a central administrator, someone with some decision-making authority, a building level leader, and an early childhood teacher. And we work with these groups, these leadership teams, to be responsive to what's on their minds. So in year 1, teacher evaluation systems was very clearly important to them. So we spent the year digging in deeper into that topic. In other years, we've focused on assessments, establishing professional learning communities locally, and even project-based learning throughout the early childhood continuum. This year, we'll focus on aligning effective instructional practices for pre-K to grade 3 and really work with districts to build relationships. We see that we have built relationships across districts and within districts. So often, teachers don't have an extended period of time with someone from the central office. So having this built into the academy provides the opportunity to talk across positions within districts. We also have seen an increase in their knowledge. So districts have reported that they feel better informed and better understand various topics because of the inclusion of the Department of Education, as well as expert speakers that we bring in to talk with the group. And lastly, we look to build capacity. So what we want is that the district's leaders that come to participate in the academy head back to their district to support a cohesive approach in early childhood in their local entities. Next, I'd like to talk about aligning the early learning across the preschool to grade 3 continuum. And the first point here really is that preschool is important. High quality early learning is a critical part of this package. We also see that transition is an important part to play in yielding success. But be cautious not to interpret this just as transition from pre-K to K. It's also transition from K to 1 and 1 to 2 and so on. Each year we should put practices into place to support children's movement from grade level to grade level. And lastly, it's about aligning practice. Here, again, it's one thing to be aligned, but it's another thing to be aligned in best practices and developmentally appropriate teaching based in standards and research. How we do that in New Jersey is through our implementation guidelines. So New Jersey has previously had guidelines on best practices for pre-K and K. Completing this cycle is the latest addition for 1st through 3rd grade. What these are not standards. We have plenty of standards in New Jersey. These are documents that provide guidance for teachers and leaders in implementing developmentally appropriate practice that also has the academic rigor that we know is necessary to set our students up for success in later school and beyond. We have a video series that supports that. For us, it was important that New Jersey teachers saw New Jersey teachers implementing these best practices. So this series is filmed within one district in New Jersey. There are 3 videos, 1st through 3rd grade, that outline best practices. This one in particular shows a deep dive into project-based learning in a 2nd grade classroom. We have others on the environment, so what a quality classroom looks like in 1st through 3rd grade, as well as a video on the content and how to engage students well within the content areas. The video series is just part of a systematic approach that we are rolling out in New Jersey. We have the video series. We're also recording webinars. And what's important about these webinars is that, one, they'll be short, 10 minutes or less, and two, is that they will be conducted by teachers and leaders in the field in New Jersey, implementing these guidelines, participating in the support, and really telling their story about the challenges that they've encountered and how they have overcome them, and then the results that they've seen. We have also developed an online community. Teachers were looking for a place where they could pose questions, share resources, receive feedback on different things that they're doing in their classrooms. We found that teachers were often going to places like Pinterest for resources, and we thought we could fulfill that need with teachers sharing on an online community from New Jersey. We also have developed in-person professional learning, so we will share with teachers and leaders on a small scale, no more than 20 per session, how to use the guidelines to implement best practices. So ideas like ramping up centers in the early elementary, implementing project-based learning, being responsive to the whole child, doing more and thinking more about approaches to learning and social-emotional development. And then in the middle there you see the Learning Academy, the EC Academy that I just talked about, where we pull together learning teams across the state. So we know that in this day of accountability that we need to be collecting data on these interventions. And the way that we approach it in New Jersey, and it's been well established and well underway in our preschool program, is through a continuous improvement cycle. Just this year, we are pushing this up into kindergarten through third grade, where we are heading out into schools to assess the needs. So we'll use classroom quality measures to evaluate classrooms, then work with individual districts to develop an improvement plan, of which will include that systematic approach to professional learning that I just described. Each district will set some goals, we'll help them implement this intervention, and then we'll reevaluate. Now, we know that oftentimes growth in the classroom with teaching and learning can take some time, so this is set up to be a 3-year program where we will work with the teachers and leaders over 3 years to work to improve the quality of their classrooms. The final bucket here is family and community engagement. Here, families are defined broadly to include all supports that children may have in the home. So we know that there is a great importance in the inclusion of families in the education of children, and that the results are not only positive for children, but also for adults and families in the process. We find that families feel more involved in the community, that they feel more connected to resources, and all of that can help aid the transition of children from home to preschool, home to kindergarten, and beyond. One point that I wanted to stress about this definition is the word systematic. Again, that this is not just a sense of one event or a series of events, but family engagement is a systematic approach to support and coordinate the culture of including family involved and communities in the school rather than just a one-shot deal. Again, here we know that there are positive effects and that families, as well as the students and the teachers and the schools, benefit from a culture where the family feels welcomed and supported by the school. The research notes the importance of engaging families on things like children's attitudes towards school, attendance, and even outcomes like success or work habits. My colleagues, Ericka and Andy, will talk more deeply about their family engagement pieces, so I will not go too far into that topic here. So just in summary, the outcome of P-3 alignment, well, for children, what it looks like is high-quality early experiences with smooth transitions. For families, it has a feeling of support within the community setting. And for schools, it simply improves teaching and learning and outcomes for children.
Thank you, Shannon. We had a question submitted prior to the webinar that I would like to ask you. How does this information that you have presented relate to the federal preschool development grants and the standards for early learning?
So as I mentioned, there is a true connection to some of this funding that states are receiving to being able to move the needle on this continuum. So states are using their preschool development grants as an opportunity to both begin the conversation of birth to grade 3 continuum and to put some solid plans in place to support the implementation of quality practices there. And for standards, we have been very diligent lately for aligning. So thinking about how our preschool standards align to our elementary and even beyond. I think what we need to focus on there is, again, the implementation of those standards. So we have high-quality standards across the board, but what does it look like? And how does it look differently when we think about a 4 or 5-year-old versus a 9, 10, or 11-year-old?
Okay. Thanks very much, Shannon. We are now going to turn to Ms. Ericka Guynes from the Earl Boyles Elementary School. This is one of the Children's Institute's Early Works demonstration sites in Oregon. The demonstration sites are looking to implement an integrated and seamless system of policies and services in early learning, health, and family engagement, and bring together various partners working on behalf of children and families. They also serve as learning laboratories for school districts, policymakers, and communities statewide, working to meaningfully connect early learning with the primary grades. Ms. Guynes is in her 9th year at Earl Boyles. She's a member of the Distinguished Leaders Council and the NIEER that Shannon mentioned earlier. She's a 2013 National Distinguished Principal of the Year, past president of the Oregon Elementary School Principals Association, President-elect of the Confederation of Oregon School Administrators, and serves on the Educator Effectiveness Leadership Cadre for her district. So I'll turn it over to you, Ericka.
Hi, thank you so much, and thank you for letting me be part of the webinar today. I really appreciated hearing our last speaker and taking notes myself, so thank you. That's exactly what Early Works is. It's really being a demonstration site for the state of Oregon to bring our families, schools, and community members together to really look at how we are best meeting the needs of our children as they enter into schools for us, and to really be building out that, the engagement for them. And I'm trying to figure out, there we go. So really, when we're looking and thinking about Early Works, we are really using some key guiding principles that include that it is all community-based and connected to the schools, that we're really using and identifying our families to engage them and to empower them in roles within our schools to help us make decisions that are grounded for our community. And that we are using and meeting with our partners and families, again, to create a local leadership between our districts and outside agencies and partners to best serve our needs in our community specifically. So, oops, I'm sorry, I keep clicking on the wrong thing. So as part of Early Works, in terms of a system, and I appreciate what you said about systems, is that we look at early works by putting pieces together around the supporting of preparing children as they come ready for school and to meet that third grade benchmark. So when we think in terms of that, one of the key foundational pieces that we look at is how are we engaging our families at home and in school before they even come to school, actually. And then what are the supports that we have in place for early learnings within our building? And then in terms of thinking more holistically about the child and the family, what are the community health needs that are here, and what are the resources that we have access to meet that? And then as part of a principle, one of the things that we are also committed to is to establish a structure, a governance, to be able to manage and to make decisions using data that has come from a community needs assessment within our district. And I think Marina's going to talk a little bit more about that later. But really using that data and creating systems within our schools to make decisions around who are our partners and are we meeting the needs of our community instead of just making assumptions like we've tended to do that in the past as K-12 organizations. Instead, we're really looking at the data and hearing what our community voices are and the needs, and then trying to leverage our resources that we have in outside agencies and partners to create kind of a holistic approach for our families as they enter in and transition. Just to give you a little bit of background about Earl Boyles, we are located in southeast Portland, and you can see we have a beautifully diverse community, very rich in racial and ethnic diversity. So you can kind of take a look at that. So we have about 15% Asian, 9% African American, Black, 31% Hispanic, 1% American Indian, 5% multiracial, and Native Hawaiian 1%, white is 38%. And then also just with languages, we have 20 languages spoken in our building alone, and we have about 40% of our students speak a second language, 82% of our students economically disadvantaged, and then about 15% of our students have disabilities. We do have a special class, a life skills class that serves our most impacted students on site. Just to tell you a little bit about the transformation, when I came to work at Earl Boyles 9 years ago, I mean, it is like I mentioned, it's a beautiful community, very diverse. But when I came on, it was very minimal family engagement. We had one parent that was volunteering to be our booster club parent, and the whole role was to sell fundraisers and pepperoni sticks. And so as part of that, with that, when she went, there was no engagement. People were not coming in. They were not engaging with the school. Title I, it was more about, I would call, family involvement. Like we were telling the families how they should be involved. And so really started thinking about that much differently, and how do we truly engage our families and our children in the learning. And so thinking about that a little different, what we decided to do is we really looked at how do we create an inclusive school that we could truly partner with families and really honor their voices of what we really need. So we started with some very simple things, parent cafes, and looked at how we could create opportunities for families to come together. So one of the first things that we did is we started to gather data in the early works when we came together, and we worked with Portland State University as our outside evaluator. And really some of the findings that came out of that early data was that parents wanted a family-friendly recreational opportunities to come together at a meeting site. They wanted a sense of cohesion. We wanted a sense of community. We needed services in our community. We found, you know, food insecurities were a big thing when we first started. We found that people wanted early childhood experiences because we don't have anything like that within our school or in our catchment area. So those were some of our early findings that we were able to respond to and be able to build strategies out around each one of those. So really there were some key strategies such as, I mentioned, early childhood. We looked at early literacy. We looked at attendance was an issue for us when we started this. We looked at, there were some initial early health issues, and family engagement. So some of the early strategies that we did is we started looking at how do we engage our families, first of all. And so, like I mentioned, we started with those early cafe models, inviting families in, doing them culturally specific, so we could just ask the question. We didn't ask anything of families. We just basically asked, you know, what makes you smile about your child? What are you most proud of? We asked questions like, what are the challenges that you face when you come into school? What makes it so that it doesn't feel like you could be a part of it? And families were great. They were really open and honest, and we had an AmeriCorps worker at that time that was bilingual, and so our Hispanic group just started growing exponentially. And they gave some great feedback that I was able to provide back to the district to make simple changes like volunteer forms that were translated and just some really simple forms. So, and then we started out with the early readiness strategy of building out our infant toddler play groups, really looking at building our preschool program. We did that in partnership with Head Start and early intervention in the district. So really came together and talked about our different standards, philosophies, and beliefs, and came up with our preschool program that's on site now. So we serve about 90 3- and 4-year-olds from our catchment area right here on site at Earl Boyles, and so they transition directly into our kindergarten now. There is also a great shared opportunity for shared professional development that connects those early learning, early years to our K-12 system, which has been helpful with the transitions as they come up. A couple of things to point out about that is when we first started, you know, because of all the different shared standards, I mean, there were some challenges within that, but what came out of it was that, you know, that talk about how do you bring systems together so that it makes sense to transition kids in so there's not confusion for families. So we did a lot of work around, you know, with Head Start and with our early intervention, how do families access, and so we created the school as the hub to come to, and so all of those channels would come through us through our registration forms. We were able to provide services that were needed, but it came out through the school. So the families had a one place that they could connect to without having to go to multiple places, whether they're Head Start or early intervention or a district student. They are our children of the community, and so it kind of created this sense of cohesion between those three different agencies and partners, which was really nice. Some other ways that we've looked at engaging our families, not just through the preschool. With our preschool, we do home visits. So all of our children have opportunities to have home visits from the teachers throughout the year. So that's been a big way to engage our families. And other ways that we do that, as I mentioned, was we do a kindergarten transitions over the summer. So first of all, in the spring, we do something called Connect to Kinder. So even the kids that are in preschool or not in preschool, we do a lot of advertisement through a listserv, through a lot of early childhood providers to bring in any families in our catchment area, and we invite them in, and we have a day where they are experiencing what does kindergarten look like. We do a parent orientation with them. We have them visit the classrooms, take a ride on the bus. So it's kind of a way that, you know, you're gonna be going into kindergarten. This is what it's going to look like. And then over the summer, our kindergarten teachers invite the families to play groups. So we do 2 play groups over the summer, and really the intent is just to build networks and family relationships. So that happens. And then we do something called early kindergarten transition through our county, where we have an opportunity in August to run like a small size class for a partial day. And families are invited in, and we have a strong parent orientation with that as well, of what will this look like to be a partner in your child's educational journey as they enter kindergarten from early childhood. The other thing we do is something called staggered start for our kindergarten students, meaning that they don't all start on the first day of school. So we take smaller groups of children. We do them, oftentimes we group by language. because of all the different languages that we're meeting the needs for, and then we do a delayed placement. And within that staggered start, we have an opportunity to get to know the families even better and get to know the children so that we know what are the needs as they come up into our kindergarten that we need to be aware of. So those are just a couple of things that we do to engage our families as they transition in from preschool into kindergarten. Some of the other things that, one thing I want to call out around the family engagement activities, because it's, when we think about family engagement at Earl Boyles, we think about it in terms of it being along a continuum, meaning that attendance, getting your child every day to school on time, you know, to have them ready. That's being an engaged parent, having, you know, helping them with their homework if they have homework, all the way to being an advocate to the state or volunteering every day. But part of that continuum, that's the advocacy and empowering our families to be leaders in our community, to walk alongside as true partners. And then we also see family engagement as academic partnerships too. So really, I think with Early Works, one thing that has really established as far as for parents to be empowered was to develop parent leaders within our building. So we have, through all of those early cafe meetings with our families, developed opportunities for families to and parents to be true leaders. They have come to the table and partnered to advocate for us as we went through our bond. They've advocated for the city and the county for different activities that we would like to instill here at Earl Boyles. But also really partnering with the families because they use the academic data to help us make change for our community as well. For example, when we started, we had 24% of our families with 10 or less books in their homes. So we reached out, we partnered with Children's Book Bank and SMART and our families. And now today we have 74% of our families that have 26 or more books based on last year's data or year before's data. Also, their focus has changed. When they want to do activities, they just don't think about, like, what is it that we want to do? If we want to support literacy, let's, for our movie night, incorporate a reading log. And kids who bring in a reading log will, you know, they'll be getting a free hot dog or nachos or something like that. So they're very thoughtful in the activities that they are planning because they're also responding to the data that they are seeing, because as our academic partners, they do see that data and help us make those decisions that are going to drive us to a more positive outcomes for the children. And then we also do there's an example of the preschool curriculum night that we do, and just making sure that they continue to be our families, continue to be our academic partners, and providing them those tools that could be used at home is important as well. This is the leadership, an example of, they're the cornerstone to the success of a community school. Without our parents, we would not be able to do what we have been able to achieve through Early Works at all. They're amazing women and men that help support us. You can see that picture of our families there with our mayor, and they were actually doing some advocacy to help pass our school bond. We built an early learning wing here 4 years ago, and our community, as I mentioned, is 82% free and reduced lunch, but our board got behind supporting a bond, and our community passed it, and we had $3.5 million for our early learning, our early childhood center. And without the parents, they were key and instrumental in raising that additional $3.5 million by going to the city, the county, the state for additional funding. They also helped with site visits through our capital campaign. So again, that partnership and engaging our families allow us as a school to do what we could not do alone. So it's had a tremendous difference for our community. I know some of the questions are like, is it making a difference? Absolutely. So what we're seeing is this is some examples of our kindergarten readiness skills and early literacy. And you can see we're in 2014-15, the kinders that went to our EB pre-K how they compare to our district average, state average, or the kinders that come in without any pre-K experience. The other things that we're seeing is chronic absenteeism is dropping every year. So in 2000, let's see, it'd be 13-14, we had 14% with chronic absenteeism in kindergarten. In 2014-15, we had 9%. So it continues to get stronger every year because we work directly with our families as partners. And again, it's not the school saying this is what you have to do. It's us sitting down together and saying, what is it we need to do? What are the barriers that we need to address as a community and as partners? So we're seeing great data with that. We're also seeing, you know, families wanting to stay put. That's the other thing. Even though we have a housing issue here in our community, we are seeing families that really are working hard to stay put. The mobility has decreased over a period of time. The other thing is that we are the lowest in mobility in our district, which is a great celebration, because if we can keep families here, we can work with them longer. We figure out, you know, as they come in, because we now have started to build out our 0 to 3. So we have families coming in and doing infant play and learn groups 2 days a week in our infant toddler space. And we're really seeing the results of that as well, being able to build those connections with our families much earlier. Again, this is the interpersonal, social, emotional skills. You can see, again, we are in the blue there, 2014-15, and looking where we're at with the district and state average. You can see there is a very good results that are coming out of that. And so I really attribute it to the family engagement, those transitions to kindergarten that I mentioned, and building those relationships with our families much sooner. And so are there any questions that you might have?
Hi, Ericka, it's Fiona. So we have a couple of questions for you. One is, what early literacy and social skills were measured? You showed a couple of slides with data, and we're just curious what exactly was measured.
Okay, so we're talking about, let's see, this slide right here, correct? So we were looking at the, that's for early literacy. We were looking at the Oregon Kindergarten Assessment. We used the Child Behavior Rating Scale, and there were total possible points of 5. So what we did is this incoming kindergarten students with their kindergarten readiness across the state will take it. There's an academic component, and there's a behavioral rating component as well. And so what it looks like is how they get along with peers, their interactions, how they play, how they communicate, and then that is a rating that each teacher, a kindergarten teacher, collects that data at a certain point. It's actually happening right now in this month of October, and then we submit it to the state on their higher interpersonal social skills.
Great, and a second question that has come in, what kind of data do you think are most important for early learning providers and families to share with kindergarten teachers?
Oh, I love that question because we revisit it every year, really. You know, a couple of things come to mind. I think the social emotional piece is some of the most key because our preschool is a half-day session, and then they go into a full-day K, which is much different. So you go from a classroom that's 3 hours and 15 minutes with 3 adults that are present to a classroom of 29 students with 2 adults present from 8:30 to 3:15. So that's a very big difference. And so knowing the child's social emotional and what supports are needed, and also knowing like the families, the parents, what do they believe in their children? What are their strengths? Knowing the child's strengths and what we can work towards, or if there's any particular barriers, I think, too. Are there triggers for behavior? Are there you know, are the communication issues? What do we need to know about the household? I mean, are there stressors in the household that we might want to, as our partnership with the parent, know about to be able to support, so we're not, you know, triggering the child, you know, without being aware of. So I would say the social emotional pieces, the pieces that would be any barriers for that child or the family as the child comes into kindergarten, those pieces of data are really important, and we collect that in a couple of different ways here. We have a behavior team that looks at behavior at all levels, so from pre-K on, like what are the social emotional needs that are coming up. So we have an opportunity to meet, and then we also do, as we transition our pre-K into K, we have the teachers at the end of the year will fill out like a profile sheet on each child, and they share that up with the teacher that's there, which is also very, very helpful. So those are a couple, and we do a questionnaire for all of our children, both in pre-K and in K, that the parents fill out, so we get a really good glimpse of like what does this child look like holistically. And then it also identifies if there's any stressors in the home for parents as well that we can run through our teams to see like what are our outside agencies or partners that could support any barriers that need to be addressed. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much, Ericka. So we're going to turn now to Mr. Andy Bowe from the Elkton School District in Oregon. Andy has been the superintendent of the Elkton School District since 2013. He served in various roles in Southern Oregon, including being the Title I Director, a Special Education Director, an Executive Council member of the Douglas County Education Service District, and a member of the Advisory Council for the Community Care Organization. His involvement with the Early Works demonstration site has largely been through a regional preschool to grade 3 effort called North Douglas P3, which involves 3 communities in Southern Oregon, Drain, Elkton, and Yoncalla. All 3 school districts have been collaborative partners in implementing programming in the region, including a regional community health assessment to learn more about the health of young children and their families in the region, and to discuss what can be done to improve the community's health given its importance to educational achievement. So Andy, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and the community health needs assessment is kind of one of our latest achievements. We're just going into the phase of asking folks questions, so and sending that out to communities and getting some feedback. It's been really kind of spun out of this work with P3, so we're excited about that. I really wanted to talk, and Ericka hit on a lot of the points that come together when you develop these programs. But I really want to talk today about, you know, what we're doing on the ground in Elkton and then in these other 2 school districts. I think it's fair to note, though, that Yoncalla is an Early Works demonstration site as well, and really prompted us to look into this type of intervention and getting kiddos engaged earlier. And so that's been a huge thing for us in our region, that we were able to lean on them with those lessons learned and kind of develop programming that engages kids earlier. So when it comes to communication and collaboration, I think that's really the time spent visiting with and involving parents is the critical thing. We're a school district of roughly 250 kids, that's K-12. We're in a remote area of Oregon. We have, you know, numerous needs, and some of those being just, you know, family things, but also being transportation is hard. We're a big school district in size, geography, but not so much in people. And so getting people involved, bringing them to our schools and having conversations about what kind of services we'll provide through those open house nights and through our parent advisory council are crucial to developing these programs. And then another thing that came out of programming, this P3 initiative, was our collaboration with other school districts. Because in the past, actually in a lot of places I've worked, you know, school districts don't reach down very well, don't look outside of their kindergarten classrooms to kids that are going to be coming to them. And so that has been a huge step with the 3 of our districts to really talk about how we do that effectively. And to be honest, we weren't very good at it when we started talking. And we've developed some of these programs to do that and to really look at what we can do as districts to kind of look at kiddos before they get to us and to provide some service. And so we're lucky in that regard. And then also just collaborating between districts. Rural districts, at least in Oregon, are not famous for a lot of collaboration. They're oftentimes pretty insular and don't look outside of their borders. Elkton is a little bit different in that we're a charter school, and so we attract kiddos from other districts that are, coming to us from Reedsport, which is another town, Drain and Yoncalla, and also Sutherland. So we, as a district, understood we need to reach out because these kids that are coming to us aren't prepared for kindergarten, and we also want to reach out to their families so they understand what our district can provide. And since I don't have control of the slides, we can go ahead and flip the slide to the next one. Okay, so some of those local lessons that we learned through our programming, and I'll kind of describe the two programs that I'm really talking about. So we developed kind of a playgroup model, which was 2 days a week in our school district. We were lucky enough to hire a local person, and I'll talk more about that, how imperative that is. But kids and families were able to come, and we had started it out in a church facility in town because we didn't have space in our elementary school. That's now expanded to another local spot since we're engaged in developing a preschool, which we haven't had for several years in Elkton. So the playgroups were really a start to having conversations with parents and getting kids involved on a weekly basis. Which was really important. The other really big project that we put together was our summer reading program. And what we did is we collaborated with Drain, who has a swimming pool, which is great, and brought kids to the pool for 3 days a week during the summer for 4 weeks. We involved the local library to provide a reading time. We also hired a person from Elkton to make phone calls to kind of rally our community to send kids. And we ended up sending more than just our P3 kids. We ended up sending a lot of just families that got on our bus, so much so that we had our bus was full. So they got to go, they got to read, they enjoyed lunch, and then they got to swim for an hour. And that's what, the kind of that last bullet is it's a joke, but the kids really do like to swim, and so do families. And so that was kind of a fun payoff for all this. But what we learned from developing those two programs is that in our rural setting, it's imperative to hire staff from the community. So in order to recruit families that are local, and in order to get kids to come to programs, they have to have familiar faces. And so that was a big key to us, and an understanding that we didn't have to begin with. That each individual community would have to have a person. And then dedicating a person was the key for us to really increase that participation. And what that requires, unfortunately, and a big piece of that is paying somebody a living wage to do that work. And in a rural district without, some of that funding available through the grant, it's difficult to do. However, I believe that this experience will carry on and even past the life of the grant, and the district and my board has seen enough of a positive change to say, hey, we'll staff this going forward. And so that's a big change, going 3 years ago to having none of this to now being able to support that. Then we also found out that you have to call parents, and then you have to go to their homes and you have to visit with them, and then you have to call them again, and you have to do those things that seem above and beyond, but that are critical to engaging those families and getting them on the bus and letting them know where that bus is going to be. And that's kind of part of the next bullet is the transportation that we provided. We contract our busing, and so we're able to bring folks in during the summer to do that. Folks have to be, that transportation has to be reliable. It has to be there to pick kids up. It's the little things that really add up if they don't go well that kind of shoot you in the foot with these programs. So that's another key piece to this. And the reason for that is because it's not just down the block. It's a 25-minute drive to get to the swimming pool. And so if you miss the bus, you're likely not going to go, and for a variety of reasons. But transportation is a key in our rural area. And then district commitment of time, staff, and funding has to be there. So, our district stepped up, and the other 2 districts also did, and said, this is something we're going to do. This is something we believe in, and it's going to be something that's ongoing. It's not just a flash in the pan. And so that's not without a lot of work, though, and a lot of not selling the product, but getting out there and saying, hey, this is good for families. This is good for our schools, because we're preparing kids before they get to us. And so if we can go to the next slide. And with that, and I don't have the graphs here, but our data shows an increase in attendance. Just instantly, that first year after that first summer reading program, we saw kids wanting to come to school. One of the things that's huge, which we overlooked, and I think a lot of folks do, it doesn't matter if we're rural or urban or wherever you are, is eating our food, riding on our buses, seeing those familiar faces of folks that are going to be there on the first day of school are critical, and it makes everybody feel better about the situation. Our folks, our teachers and our staff, but also kids, obviously, but also parents. When they've met with folks and they've seen them and they know them, it's a huge thing. And then one of the things that actually came out of it, which is kind of funny, but not really for us, is that as a charter school, our enrollment is a bit down because we recruit kindergartners and students from those other districts and have done that for about 10 years. Well, when those other districts started to engage those kids earlier, our kindergarten enrollment went down, which tells me, it's a true indicator that they've done a better job of gathering those families in, engaging those families earlier, and whoever does that gets those kiddos in their schools. And so, it's just kind of a thing that came out of all of this that was unique to us. And then, like I talked about, kids and families are less stressed because of these kinds of programs. And, providing them and we provide them with books at every library visit. Kids got a gift pack on their last swim to, kind of a readiness for school pack. All of those things work towards lowering that stress and then also raising that level of family commitment when school does start. And so in all, those things were really positive experiences for us. Okay, and I think there might be one more slide. Is that right, or is that it? That is it. So I would take any questions.
Great, Andy. So there is a question for you. Have you had to, in your site, are there any things you've had to do with help transitioning families that are not currently in an early education or early child care setting?
Yes. So what we do is through our outreach, we actually have a person that makes those phone calls and does some home visiting in our district. And so we'll send that out to families that we understand, have not been engaged yet. You got to understand that's only a couple of families, in our rural area. But that outreach has been huge. So an example of that was, prior to last summer, there was a family that we knew about, but had been unable to engage, and so we sent our folks out there to visit and get them going, and they attended our summer reading program. So it's that outreach, it's that direct connection that really makes the difference in getting those folks engaged.
Perfect. Thank you. That's all the questions that have come in for you. So okay. Thanks, Andy. So now we're going to look forward to hearing from Dr. Marina Morell as our discussant. She is the Senior Research and Policy Advisor at the Children's Institute here in Portland, Oregon. They focus on fostering effective transitions from pre-kindergarten to kindergarten and ensuring all children arrive at kindergarten prepared and on track to succeed. Marina leads the organization's research on prenatal to grade 3 issues. She was instrumental in advocating for and winning a new mixed delivery preschool program in Oregon during the 2016 legislative session, and she continues to advocate for policies that support the continuity and coherence of the educational continuum starting at birth. So welcome, Marina.
Thank you so much, Fiona. And first of all, I just want to thank all of the speakers today. Everybody did a wonderful job, and this is an incredibly rich discussion making really clear connections between research and practice. I'm now going to summarize some of the key themes that we heard today and then discuss key opportunities for others to move this work forward that are afforded through the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, which replaces No Child Left Behind and reauthorizes the 1965 Elementary and Secondary School Act. I really think the discussion today emphasizes that the smooth and successful transition to kindergarten requires attention to several key related elements. First, we heard from Dr. Ayers that we need that strong leadership and governance system and collaboration from a variety of key partners. And ensuring that these partnerships and the leadership are all clear, that successful kinder transition that includes parents and community members as key partners in that decision-making is critical and central to moving forward children's school readiness outcomes and their outcomes at 3rd grade and later on. So as Dr. Ayers demonstrated, this leadership needs to have a mindset that is data-driven with a goal of that continuous improvement. We have found in both of our local place-based initiatives that community needs and priorities do shift over time, demographics can shift, and we really need to be ongoing and continuously looking at that data on an annual basis to make sure that our goals are being driven and informed by the community and those parents. So child readiness really relies on a set of interrelated supports from a variety of systems is what we found, including the family in the center. And so what we heard from Ericka and Andy was that when we are working with vulnerable families, we need to begin by building that trust. So that really takes a lot of time, and I don't think that either of them talked, I mean, they talked to it, but they didn't emphasize how much time that trust building takes. And it's every year you get new families, right? So you have to restart with that trust building. And the other key theme that I thought was about meeting parents where they are and listening to their needs to build the programming that will best support them and their child. So we saw through Andy and Ericka's work that this means different things for the populations that they serve. So for Ericka, she has 20 different languages that she's serving, and Latino families really needed a lot of support and language supports. And for Andy, that really meant finding and hiring that trusting person in the community that could bring those parents in and finding a hook for those families too, finding that summer activity through swimming, which I thought was really brilliant. And maybe it doesn't directly tie in your mind, you know, immediately to thinking about school transition or kindergarten readiness, but it mattered for that community that that's how they were going to bring families together and start that relationship building. So finding that key hook and meeting families where they are is a central theme, I thought. And both Andy and Ericka really did highlight and share that doing this work really does require a significant culture shift for schools and those adults and leaders in a school to shift from that adult-centered perspective to a balanced child and family-centered approach to school transition. As Dr. Ayers mentioned, this needs to be a systematic inclusion of families at multiple levels. So I think everybody mentioned at some point or another that this isn't a one and done, this isn't a one-off. This needs to be central to everything that you do and thinking in your whole system. So in our 2 early works demonstration sites, moving towards being whole child and family-centered has also meant having to make meaningful connections to health and those other community services. So Andy mentioned that his district and the whole region actually of North Douglas is participating in a community health assessment. Earl Boyles did that as well. After we did our initial community needs assessment, we just saw a really clear need for, we kept hearing that families weren't getting access to their primary care physician. They weren't getting access to developmental screenings and referrals and supports for things that they needed. And so we went through a process to do a community health assessment deeply. So once you start doing this work, you start to unpack other layers that need to be attended to if you really start listening to the concerns and needs of your families. So this next slide just really shows that you need to be intentional from the get-go about this. And so we, in both of our sites, really started with a theory of change. And we always work on two levels when we think through our programming and what our families need. And so those system pieces need to be in place to ensure that structures and that intentionality is there that we've talked about, and that data sharing and that data-driven decision-making. And then also at this simultaneously, then we can think about the programming that's really going to move the dial to increase that long-term goal of children meeting third grade reading and math benchmarks. So now I'm going to shift to, you're probably sitting there thinking, wow, these two districts have done a lot, and how did they get there? And how could this work for me in my community? And it is a lot of work, but there is some good news coming from the federal level around this work that we've been talking about today, and that is that the new ESSA requirements really provide some exciting opportunities for states and districts to incorporate and better align early childhood education in their state and district work to close achievement gaps and promote continuous improvement for all children. ESSA provides some expanded opportunities for direct services. So Title I explicitly calls out opportunities to fund early childhood education services as well as professional development for early childhood educators at the local level. Title I can expand access to early childhood education and support quality improvements within those existing programs as well. Additionally, a new feature through ESSA includes a preschool development grant program, and I saw that in advance of this webinar that someone asked a question about how does this relate to those preschool development grant programs. So this is an extension of the Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge preschool development grants, but they're really considering it a new initiative under ESSA that can assist states to develop a strategic plan to facilitate collaboration and coordination among existing preschool programs designed to prepare disadvantaged children. So Head Start, state-funded preschool. And within the preschool development grants, they specifically call out needing to attend to these improving kindergarten transitions from those early childhood programs into elementary schools. I'll just say that at this point, there's a lot more unknown than known about how these preschool development grants will play out and look like, but it is important that states that want to draw down these dollars and districts that want to engage in accessing those dollars need to be thinking right now to strategically include that planning, coordination, and collaboration between the early childhood education system and K-12 leaders to prepare for this federal opportunity. So in addition to the preschool development grants, which really speak to those direct services, for states who do not receive those grants, there are other opportunities. Title I still, you can leverage those dollars, and Title II also provides some funding to address kindergarten transitions to elementary school, including funding for professional development on school readiness for principals and school leaders. So early childhood education directors and early childhood education program providers could all be working together around professional development on these kinder transitions. They're also strongly pointing out and encouraging joint professional development across the early learning system and K-12 as specified key allowable strategies to meet the needs of students preschool through age 8. In Title III, it also includes support strategies to promote school readiness of English language learners in their transition from early childhood education programs such as Head Start and state-run preschool programs to elementary schools. So I think that's a really important thing to be considering if you're serving a large population of English language learners. So all in all, these opportunities offer a great commitment to improving early learning and deepening connections between the early years and our formal public education system within the nation's most important education law, and this has not been seen historically. The law acknowledges that early childhood education is a part of the educational continuum that must successfully connect to elementary education. So really what I see that's so exciting about ESSA, it's really honoring and reflective of the hard work that leaders like in New Jersey and Andy Bowe and Ericka Guynes that we heard from today have been pioneering in their own communities without any mandates or allowances at the federal level or extra dollars to do this work. So with that, I would like to just thank our presenters again for their time today, sharing their great work, and I will turn it back over to Fiona.
Great, thank you, Marina. We're going to pause and just do a couple of questions and answers. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions of all of the presenters. Anyone feel free to jump in with your response. One of the questions is around, there's been quite a lot of mention of community needs assessments to kind of figure out what the next steps are or the first steps are regarding transition in the community. So how do you suggest going about collecting data for community needs assessments, and what would you advise for someone who's getting started with a similar project in their community?
Well, what I would start with is sitting down and thinking about what existing data you do have and existing data in the community, and start talking with partners that you might have. So we had the luxury of getting one of our local universities had a grant, and we were just getting started, the Children's Institute, when I say we, with thinking about this new initiative, and had selected Earl Boyles as our partner school. And just we were able to reach out to Portland State, who actually had this pot of money to be able to do that. So I would say, you know, look to local resources. Do you have a local community? Do you even have a university that's interested in doing this type of work? Sometimes there's graduate students that are willing and able to and desperate to find a community site to work with. So just really sitting down and thinking through unusual partners that you might not have thought about working with before. And much of the data, like we were able to collect primary data collection from families and community members, but you could also look at existing sources. So as Andy mentioned, the community health assessment is underway. To get that kicked off, we were able to look at a variety of data sources that are available through our local CCOs who are starting to do community health assessments themselves. And so there's, you know, just really sitting down and thinking through the data that you might have, or are there DHS partners that might have some data that would help think through some of the community resources and needs, things like that. So I think just thinking through partners really systematically and strategically. Ericka, do you have anything else that you would add about that?
No, I think back to the early work that we did, and I think Marina addressed that quite nicely. We really looked at, too, we did an eco map of our community and what were our strengths and challenges. So we identified some of that up front before we did the community needs assessment. That was helpful to kind of narrow down the focus of the questions. But again, that partnership is key, and who you're going to be inviting in to help you with that.
And I think it's really important to note, too, that this is another process that takes a lot of time to develop the right questions, to ask the right folks, to access the right agencies. You know, Portland State's been instrumental with us in providing that support, but even with that, you know, it's taken us 4 or 5 months to really get a handle on how we want to do this. And so, but the data is going to be valuable to us to see, you know, really how our families are impacted. So it's worth it, but it's a commitment.
And Fiona, there are 2 resources that I'll just mention. The Annie E. Casey Foundation has put out a document, Engaging Parents, Developing Leaders, It's a self-assessment and planning tool for nonprofits and schools. And then also Arthur Reynolds has a needs assessment of parent engagement practices that he has, and that's available through the Child Parent Centers. He has a website through the University of Minnesota that you can access those.
Great, thank you so much. And there's one more question, and again, anybody feel free to jump in to respond to this question. So when you're thinking about being a school leader, what advice would you have for coordinating the transition efforts with early learning providers? I think it's often the case that there's a disconnect between the K-12 system and the early learning field, and so just kind of ideas you might have around making that connection purposeful and something that works well in your community.
Well, I think that first of all, as a district level person, you have to realize that getting out in front of this and getting kids prepared makes our teachers, makes our community better in the long run. And so it's that commitment and realization that that early intervening and that family engagement is going to pay off. And I don't know that school districts often think that way. And so you've got to have that kind of that mind shift to say, hey, this is something that's going to be critically important. And then I think the other part to it is getting out in the community and letting folks know what you're doing and what you want to do, and then reaching out to those folks that provide. In our rural community, we don't really have any other child care provider to reach out to, and so it was more of a collaboration between the three districts for us to gain kind of that knowledge of who's out there. So, but you've got to start from the basics of, yes, this is important, and the way you do that is by providing the data that Ericka showed, from that first year of engagement.
Yeah, and Andy, I agree. I think it is. It's getting out there and knowing who your community is. Because I think back to like before we had the preschool, like how did we connect with folks and really understanding where are our kids before they come to us. The in-home care providers or early childhood special education providers, connecting with the Head Starts, or if there is daycares within your catchment area, really connecting with those folks, and then having a system as a district, I think helps, knowing that like our district folks will organize meetings with our incoming students that may have early childhood special education, or, inviting providers to come in and meet with our teachers so that we kind of have an awareness of who's coming up so we can support. So again, it's just like you said, knowing those folks that, where are our kids coming from and who do we need to connect with, and making sure we're trying to, find all those folks in our area.
Great, thank you. This is Fiona. I'd like to offer our presenters an opportunity to offer any closing comments before we finish up the webinar.
Fiona, do you want me to address that? There was a question that was asked about suggested interventions and strategies for teaching the alphabet, and I'm guessing that must be at that transitional year of kindergarten. Would you like me to address that or not?
That would be perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so a couple of things that we do in our pre-K is we use handwriting without tears, and that also is a transition into kindergarten. We also use Alpha Friends. Both of those are very movement-oriented and very developmentally appropriate for children. We also do a lot of games that build on letter sounds and numbers. We do letters of the week. We also do phonemic awareness. There's activities that we have within each classroom to build out sounds. We do something called core enhancement charts, looking at, again, letter sounds and phonemic awareness. And when we do specific interventions at kindergarten level, it is a small group instruction, and it's looking at, we always start with that phonemic awareness first. So those are a couple of things that we do here at Earl Boyles, specifically around those strategies for teaching the alphabet to our young friends.
Thank you, Ericka. Anyone else have closing comments?
Well, I would just say, you know, never to underestimate your communities and their need for this, but also their support that you'll get when you reach out and put together a good quality product and program. People just, they come and they're involved, and it's awesome. And kids love to swim. I think it's kind of our thing that you know, all of those things we achieved, but also had a way to get them there and to have families involved. So it's good work, and it pays off in the end.
Andy, I agree with you, and I think the idea too is that it's hard work, and that, you know, with each step you need to keep pushing forward and you know, reevaluating, is this the approach that we should do based on the feedback that you receive from the families.
All right. This is Fiona Helsel from REL Northwest. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. Particularly, thank you to our 4 presenters today. I appreciate, on behalf of REL Northwest, your participation in this event. For those of you who are still listening, there will be a recording of this webinar on our website, relnw.educationnorthwest.org. And you will also be getting sent a feedback survey. We would greatly appreciate your feedback on this webinar. It will be coming from the Concord Evaluation Group. Thank you again for joining us, and hope you all have a great rest of your day.